I find myself struggling with believing in God, like something you can't see. So how do you like remain so strong in your faith with believing in something that you can't actually see?
Good question. Can I see your brain?
No.
No. Can I smell your brain? Can I touch your brain? No, I'm not going to try to do a lobotomy on you, sir. Don't worry. All right. You're articulate. You've just asked a very hard, very thoughtful question. Obviously, between your two handsome ears is a brain. You've dressed yourself. I assume your teammates did not dress you this morning. You dressed yourself, right? Congratulations, you guys, on winning the Ivy League this year. That's awesome. All right. So, I have never seen your brain, smelled it, or touched it, but I'm convinced you have a brain because of the orderly way you dress yourself and the articulate speech that flows from your mouth. Similarly, I cannot see God, touch God, or smell God. But the amazing order and design of the universe points me to some type of intelligent mind. I don't know that mind, obviously, but there's got to be an intelligent mind. Why are you so convinced of that, Cliff? Well, obviously, I'm not a football player. But about 50 years ago, I really wanted to play basketball at Davidson College down in North Carolina. So I was there trying out, and I barely made the team. And I had good seats for every game. And the reason I had good seats for every game was because I couldn't put a ball through a hoop 10 feet off the ground at a high enough percentage. So I was on the bench for every game. So if someone wants to tell me, oh yeah, well, putting a ball through a hoop 10 feet off the ground, it just happens by chance. I know that's a lie. I tried it. It doesn't work. And I did not have the physical coordination, the quickness, the talent to put the ball through the hoop enough times to play against NC State, UCLA, Notre Dame, St. John's. I wanted to be on that court, but I couldn't get the ball through the hoop at a high enough percentage. So I know that if someone wants to tell me order comes from chaos by chance, they're smoking something I don't want to smoke. That's ludicrous. So the first reason that I'm convinced that God exists, this unseen God, is because order and design point to some type of intelligent mind. Another reason that I believe in God, even though I can't see God, is because I experience love. Would you please show me a foot of love? Would you please show me a pound of love? You know you can't, neither can I. But you also know that it's real. You also know you take love out of your life, and I don't care how many Ivy League titles you win in football, it's baloney. Because all your relationships with your teammates are just going to be robotic. No, you got relationships with the football players here at Harvard, and those relationships and friendships, I think, mean even more than winning the Ivy League title. So, you just got to think and observe your life. Yeah, but Cliff, you can't scientifically prove God. You're absolutely right. I could never scientifically prove God. The same way we cannot scientifically disprove God. And you know what's wrong? What's wrong is this line of thinking. Unless you can scientifically prove it, it's not true. You got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me. Would you please scientifically prove to me that unless I can scientifically prove something, it's not true? You see, that statement, unless you can scientifically prove something, it's not true, is not science. It's a philosophy. And it happens to be a philosophy that is totally wrong. It's self-contradictory. Does not work.
I think, intelligent design is proof enough of, an intelligent creator. But
Yep.
How would you go on to prove that this God is still relational beyond the creation?
Very good. Hard question. That is exactly where Jesus Christ enters the picture. See, at first, there's enough evidence that some type of intelligent mind exists. But what is this intelligent mind like? Who is this God? And Jesus claimed to be God, revealing himself in human form, speaking human language. Well, come on, guys. That's the way you learn. Language, communication, relationship. Hi, I'm Cliff. What's your name?
Chris.
What? What's your... Okay, not only am I being rude to Chris, I'm an arrogant twit. I think I know your name better than you do. So I'm going to create you to be Andrew or Harry, when in reality, you're Chris. Just take it to God. Hey, God, you're a 6'1" white God. Yeah, that's not the real living God. That's a God who's an idealized version of myself. Don't play that game. I don't create God. You don't create God. God exists separate from me and separate from you. Therefore, the question is, in the same way that I have to have the humility to allow you to be Chris, and reveal to me your real name, that is equally true about God. I better have the humility to allow God to reveal himself, whoever God is. That's where Muhammad, the avatars of Hinduism, and Jesus Christ enter the picture, all claiming to reveal God accurately. But they contradict each other, although they are in agreement on a lot of ethical issues. They also contradict each other, so they can't all be right. So then the question is, who is supported by the best evidence? Who is trustworthy? Who can you rely on? Who is credible? And I think the evidence of the way Jesus lived, taught, died, and rose from the dead, Chris, is he's reliable. If you die, sir, and rise from the dead, I promise to listen very carefully to everything you have to say. It's that resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead that sets Christ apart as totally unique.
Do you know the story of like the prostitute when they bring him in front of, like they bring him in front of Jesus?
John 8.
Yes, and he says,
Yeah.
let the person who has no sin cast the first stone. That story, my friend just brought this up to me yesterday.
Yes.
He knew he was going to be here.
Yes.
He later added on.
Yes.
So how do I, like, especially because we're looking at it like, with the document, I rely on this document. This is what I believe in.
Good.
It's being later added on. Where's the credibility in that?
You bet. Well, the credibility is that for years there's been a footnote under John chapter 8, verses 1 to 11. This account is not found in the earliest Greek manuscripts. We have such a high degree of certainty that we really have what those authors wrote. It's embarrassing. Are there some textual questions? Yes, sir, there are. But remember, the New Testament that we have in English today is based on 5,800 Greek manuscripts or pieces of manuscript dated from the early 2nd century through the 10th century, all agreeing to an infinitesimal degree. So 5,800 Greek manuscripts, 10,000 handwritten Latin Vulgate manuscripts, 9,300 Syriac, Slavic, Gothic, Ethiopic, Coptic, and Armenian manuscripts. Sir, we have approximately 25,000 handwritten manuscripts of the New Testament. If you were to wipe all those out, in the writings of the early church fathers from the 2nd through the 4th century, there are 38,389 quotes in the writings of the early church fathers from the 2nd through the 4th century. In other words, we have every verse in the New Testament in the writings of the early church fathers except for 11. So we have an incredibly high degree of certainty that we really have what was written. Is it a perfect computer printout? No, it is not. Are there manuscript variants? Yes, there are. But all those variants, none of them change the basic fundamental message of the gospel of Jesus Christ. So it's been carefully preserved. Read it simply as history and ask yourself, does the historical evidence point to Christ being reliable or not?
Some people say, well, what if they were like schizophrenic or they were mass hallucinating? And I usually say, it's 500 people. But to that, what would you respond to that?
Yeah, psychologically, you can't have mass hallucinations. It's impossible. As a therapist with my own eyes, I've seen them hallucinate. I've seen them have mass delusions. I'm talking about a singular person. One person having mass delusions or mass hallucinations. They're schizophrenic, they're bipolar, they could be on a serious substance. But 500 people, absolutely impossible.
When we look at Adam's first sin, right? So as in, like, he sins, and immediately God says, like, the earth that you're going to toil on is going to be immediately harder, right? And then obviously you have, like, when we get to, like, on top of, like, the Amalekites and, like, why God wiped them out, and when I try to help people out, it's like, well, the Amalekites trying to murder the Israelites for hundreds of years, God gave them time to repent. But the biggest thing is not the animals, but, like, the children. It's like, what is the gain of murdering the children as well? Because they're innocent. It doesn't Christ tell us, let the children come, they have no sin. So what? I get it's like I'm not all knowing, but I feel like to claim that you're all good, all knowing, all powerful, but you're you commanded to murder children. But then also in multiple other places in the Old Testament, this says wipe out everyone, but they still leave survivors. I want your perspective on that.
You always have to go back to what is God dealing with in the entire narrative of the Bible. And he's dealing with an enslaved people group that he wants to free ultimately. And so he's dealing with a people group that is very challenging, grumbling all the time, going their own way, building idols, and just totally disregarding him. And God has to punish them at times. Well, then all of a sudden you stumble upon the Amalekites and Canaanites. God gives them 400 years to change. 400. That's a big deal. That's a lot of time to change, but they don't want to. And so what kind of judgment do we see in the Middle East or other places that America, unfortunately, goes about meting out at times? The destruction of a small village
Yeah, but
with a bomb.
God is not simple. He's all good, so I don't get that comparison.
Well, that was a sinful human nature that was definitely exercising itself in a very powerful way in the ancient Near Eastern culture. And so, again, it's God deciding. I mean, if you want to take it from a historical perspective on what's going to happen to those kids, they're going to be enslaved for the rest of their lives, and they are going to be abused by men. They're going to be raped their entire lives. All right, so that doesn't, again, I still struggle with God saying, all right, just wipe out the civilization after 400 years. Not the whole civilization, because they crop up later, obviously. It's not genocide. I still have a tough time with it. But again, it's God working on hearts. He's setting the boundary lines to ultimately upend slavery, upend the morally just irrepute of what's going on in the Old Testament, and then ultimately to free slaves in the New Testament. So it's you can't get out from underneath it in terms of the challenge of that law. Fully agree. And yet, what's the alternative? The alternatives, you're going to get pretty specific, and you're going to get pretty 21st century understanding of what is love in my idea, in my mind. No, God is working in the Roman Empire. I mean, why didn't God Paul abolish slavery immediately? Wouldn't that have made more sense? Wouldn't that have been more just and loving? In the ancient Near Eastern culture, the judgment of the Amalekites and Canaanites is not ideal, but it's working within that culture to bring about justice.
First off, I would like to say I am a Christian, but
Yep.
one of the issues I have just kind of beyond, this world is the idea of heaven
Yes?
and working with the idea that there is this perfect, painless afterlife. Why do I not do, and if, you accept Jesus, we get there. Why do I not do one of two things? Why do I not live a life full of sin, immediate gratification,
Yep.
live my way, and then
Yep.
say, I accept Christ at that last moment
Yep.
and go spend the rest in heaven?
Yep.
Why am I not in more of a rush to get there right now? Seek out death
Yep.
and accept God,
Right.
and immediately get rid of the tragedy that exists within this world.
Good question. Chris, it's been a privilege meeting you today. I don't want to be your friend today. I would really be interested in a friendship 20 years from now. I don't think you have to have a PhD in psychology to realize I'm a flaming superficial hypocrite. I don't really care about you. I don't want to be your friend today. 20 years from now? Yeah. So if I think I can say, hey, God, just before I check out, in order to get to heaven, I want to be your friend. How trivial. How hypocritical.
How would waiting towards the end of the line be the comparable?
Oh, well, you're right. The thief on the cross was at the end, nailed next to Christ. And Christ forgave him and gave him eternal life. So yes, you're right. If you, just before you die, repent and genuinely trust in Christ, he promises to forgive you. He promises to give you eternal life. But my point to you in answering your question is, are you sure you're really genuine? Hey, Jesus, I don't want to get to know you today. 20 years from now, after I've sown my wild oats and done my own thing, then I'm interested. I think you're playing a game of Russian roulette. First of all, you don't guarantee when you're going to die. One of the little vessels in your head or my head could pop tonight. We could have a massive stroke and die right away. So this whole idea of, I'm going to play games with God, no, I don't think you want to do that. I think that's playing Russian roulette with your soul.
That is playing Russian roulette, letting the days play out in a way
Yep.
that you don't know what happens.
Right?
Why don't you accept God right now?
Yep.
And then either end it or seek out death through a means that is just.
Okay, good. Now, one of the main reasons I put my faith in Christ is because he reveals that God is good. And if you look at your motives, as I look at my motives, it's very rare that you're going to do what you're not convinced ultimately will bring you the most happiness. I usually do what I think will bring me the most happiness. That's the way we're hardwired. Well, why is that? I'm convinced it because God is the most joyful being in the universe. And when I live with Christ, with God, that is the height of joy. But if I'm convinced that God is an ogre or a Scrooge, out to rip me off, then why would I want to live my life for him? So you see, so much of what happened in Genesis 3, when Satan tempted Adam and Eve was, if you eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you'll be like God. Wow. And God's just kind of insecure and threatened by you, so he wants to keep you down. That is a lie from the pit of hell. God loves you. He's good. He's the most joyful being in the universe. When you understand that, you want to obey God because you know that that is the path to real satisfaction. When Tom Brady talks about, now what do I do with my life after 6 Super Bowl rings, I respect that. He's in touch with reality. So you live for a Super Bowl ring. That's great. What do you do when you have 6 Super Bowl rings? What's next, Tom? Pretty empty. Pretty trivial. Jesus Christ says, you love God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength. You love your neighbors yourself. And that's where real joy comes from. See, so it's a whole issue of who is God? What is God's character really like? Is he good or is he a Scrooge? Is he good or is he an ogre? Does he have the pathway to your best happiness and my best happiness, or does he not?
One at a time. Like heaven is eternal goodness. There is no
Right.
suffering in heaven.
Yeah.
How does any of that, living out a full life that, will have all those joys, but also the lows, how does that erase the desire to rush there? Like to rush to the end? That would be perfect.
Right. Because you understand, your life is a gift. So God gave you the gift of life, and he gave it to you for a purpose. He gave you gifts and talents, and he gave you those gifts to make this messed up world more like heaven will be. So the football team, the student body at this fine school, you're here as an ambassador of Christ to make the team, the school, a better place to be, where love, compassion, forgiveness, mercy, justice, integrity, righteousness are the order of the day. Not manipulation, not racism, not denigrating, not manipulation, not coercion, but respecting people, loving people, because that's the way God created us to live. Does that make sense? One final comment. Oh, Cliff, you're so heavenly minded, you're no earthly good. False. Why? A road that leads nowhere is not taken good care of. A road that leads somewhere important is taken care of. If the final destination of our lives is the fertilizer pit, why take care of life? But if the final destination of life is heaven, wow, you better take real good care of life.
I have a question about divinely inspired works of the Bible.
Yeah.
How can we reconcile with the fact that what was decided to be canon and non-canonical in the Bible was determined by people that lived centuries before us and by men who sinned?
Yeah.
How can we kind of reconcile with that truth, and can we ourselves see what is divinely inspired and what is not?
I can't show you that the Bible is a word of God. I mean, how do you show that any book is inspired by God? It's impossible. Now, how was the canon put together, the 27 New Testament books? It was put together by using 3 tests. First test, was it written by an eyewitness or by someone who knew an eyewitness? Second test, was it orthodox? Did it agree with the Old Testament? Thirdly, was it accepted by the churches around the known world, around the Mediterranean? And that's why Matthew through Revelation were finally agreed upon. Did a council or a pope put together the New Testament? Absolutely not. Was there some discrepancy, some disagreements among people about the Shepherd of Hermas, the Didache, 2 Peter, Hebrews? Yeah, there was some debate. The Council of Hippo Regius and the Council of Carthage in 394 and 397 did nothing new when they recorded the 27 New Testament books. Instead, they simply put their stamp of approval on what had already been decided. So no, the New Testament was not invented by a council or by a pope. It was agreed upon by the worldwide churches from Alexandria, Egypt, up around through Antioch, Jerusalem, and up around to Rome. That's how it was put together. I was at Columbia years ago, and I debated a religion professor at Columbia. He was an atheist. So he views religion as a fascinating sociological study. All right. Tragic. There's far more to faith in Christ than a sociological study. Come on. Is there a supernatural God or not? Has this supernatural God revealed himself in Jesus Christ or not? And to be honest with you, if I want a really intense debate, I don't go to the science department. I go to the religion department, the humanities. And that's where I will get the most intense, strongly worded disagreements. I'll be called a narrow-minded fundamentalist, conservative, evangelical, and probably a Republican, and, la, 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 la. And it's ridiculous. It's scary. You see, if I call myself a Christian and reject a supernatural God, what do I mean when I say Christian? If I call myself a Christian and reject the deity of Christ, what on earth am I talking about when I call myself a Christian? If I reject the bodily resurrection of Jesus Christ, what on earth am I doing when I call myself a Christian? No, a Christian is a follower of Christ who understands God is real. Christ is God in human form, and he bled and died on a cross for my sin. He rose from the dead, and he wants to live within me and change my heart.
Kind of have a little bit of trouble understanding how, like, Jesus dying on the cross, like, thanks, but how, like, what my sins, I get, like, Adam and Eve ate the apple, but, like, I don't understand, like, how it was, like, that one thing that had this whole, I don't know, I don't understand how it's, like, there are plenty of martyrs, like, I don't understand how, like, and I get that he's, like, the son of God, but I don't know, I just have a little bit of trouble, understanding why it's such a, like, why it's, like, the whole.
Why is death on the cross is such a big thing? That's the problem?
Yeah, and also, like, how can I, like, not be scared of God and, like, just love him to love him?
You bet. All right, I went to seminary about half an hour from here up on the North Shore. While I was in seminary, I had a bump in my body that concerned me. Why do you think I went to that doctor? Was I scared? Yeah. I was scared about reality. Maybe this is a tumor. And if it's malignant, I'm really in trouble. Now, fear can be good when fear wakes me up to reality. Fear can be good when I teach my grandchild we're not going to play in traffic. Some horrible things could happen. That's all right. But if I'm ruled by fear, that is tragic. If I'm paralyzed by fear, that is tragic. When a gifted OBGYN doctor sits across the table from a very uneducated woman who's never had a mammogram, if the doctor begins to realize this woman might have breast cancer, he had better look her in the face and plead with her to get a mammogram. If he doesn't, I question his love and concern for the woman. Why don't you and I go out and play in traffic on I-90? Because we don't want to end up on the bumper of a truck. Is that selfish? No. Is there some fear there? Yes. But I would hope that the real issue is we affirm our value as living beings. Therefore, we're not going to go out and play in traffic on I-90. That's not selfish. It's not simply fear. It's an affirmation of life. And to be honest with you, when you put your faith in Christ, you go to Harvard or MIT, not because you're scared, not because you're a selfish narcissist, but you want to use the gifts and talents that God has given you so that you can serve God by serving people more effectively. Okay, how have I not answered your excellent question?
I don't know. Like, I just don't know if I think of God as, like, I get that the New Testament's God is supposed to be a nice guy, but, like, he flooded the earth, he destroyed the tower and split up the, like, entire world into a bunch of, like, I just think that he's not very nice.
Okay,
and,
good.
Like, I don't like the idea that people go to hell. Like, I know they do.
Yeah.
But I don't like that, and I don't like that I could end up in hell, and I don't like, I just don't like that. Well, it's like a personal problem, I guess. But
No, I'm like you. I don't like the idea of anybody going to hell.
so one day he just woke up and was like, I'm gonna die on a cross and everything will be okay. Like, I'm like, all.
No, everything's not going to be okay just because he dies on a cross. But we have the option of receiving his forgiveness if we repent and ask him for forgiveness. All right, here's what's helped me think that through. Little Johnny in a sandbox, 5 years old, throws sand into Tommy's face. Tommy erupts in tears. Teacher comes running out. Johnny, what are you doing? Johnny picks up sand, throws it in the teacher's face. Teacher brings little Johnny to the principal. Johnny walks into the principal's office with a hand of sand, throws it in the principal's face. Not a wise move, Johnny. Big difference from throwing sand into a playmate's face to throwing sand into a teacher's face to throwing sand into a principal's face. So the police come in. Johnny, what are you doing? Johnny picks up a handful of sand, wham, right in the officer's face. Not a wise move, Johnny. Now you're even in bigger trouble. He goes before a judge. Says, Johnny, what are you doing with your life? Johnny says, blankety blank you, and throws sand at him. Johnny, don't you realize you are beginning to defy authority figures in a deeper and more profound way? Johnny becomes an adult. The President of the United States is going by. Johnny takes out sand and throws it in the president. Not a smart move, Johnny. Now you really are in trouble. Big difference between throwing sand in the face of a playmate in a sandbox versus throwing sand in the face of the President of the United States. It's an issue of the position of the person, their authority in this world. Now, you throw sand into God's face, and you're making a big, big error. He's the God of the universe. He's ultimately the judge. All right, second point. I still don't like hell. I still don't like the idea of God judging. All right, so I'd like to meet the intellectual who holds that position. And I'd like to get a little African-American child next to me. And I'm going to kick the snot out of this little African-American kid. And then the police are going to come and say, Cliff, what did you do? And I said, well, I just kicked this little African-American kid to bits. If the police officer says to me, let's go get coffee at Starbucks, every intellectual on this campus would be outraged. What an incredible racist. What a mockery of justice. But those same people who have a problem with a police officer who says to me after I've kicked the snot out of a little kid, let's go to Starbucks. They got a problem with that. But those same people have no problem with God's all loving. So if this guy kicks the snot out of me and God says, no problem, what is God saying? God is saying, you don't matter. And if someone shoots you and murders you, no problem, because I'm lovey-dovey. It's a statement. You don't matter. The same way if the police says to me after I kick the snot out of a little African-American kid, oh, let's go to Starbucks. That's a statement. That little child does not matter. According to Christ in the Bible, you all matter. And if someone wants to murder you, someone wants to be racist towards you, someone wants to steal from you, because you matter to God, He will judge that evil deed.
We're talking about secular theories of morality. I've studied ethics here a bit. We have theories like utilitarianism, social contract theory. Very smart thinkers have contributed to the moral community. How can we say that sort of they're wrong?
Well, just because they're smart doesn't make them right. And so I would say that's true for any area of study. There's been many smart people who've studied math who were wrong, science who were wrong, like linguistics who were wrong, theology who were wrong. I mean, Jonathan Edwards, one of the greatest theologians, he's got some of his earliest manuscripts in here, and he went to Yale. He owned slaves. He was a pretty smart dude, and he owned slaves. Pretty wrong as well. And so, no, I agree to the extent of these are really smart guys who came up with different moral theories, and so they need to be taken seriously, but they're not right just because they're smart.
Yeah. Well, the most relevant piece of being right there, I would say, is getting the conclusion correct. So some of these people reach the conclusion that, for example, we ought not kill one another, we ought not steal from one another, we ought not discriminate against one another. And they do this through purely secular means.
Right.
These are moral principles that I imagine you would agree with.
Mm-hmm.
So if these moral principles are correct, and we arrive at them through social contract theory, for example, then where's the difference?
Well, again, social contract theory, though, if everybody's coming to the point of saying, this is truly right, this is truly wrong, still somebody can be a free rider to say, okay, as long as I'm not hurting the masses that came together and decided this is right or wrong, and I can get away with this, if I'm not really hurting them, I'm going to go ahead and do it.
But I mean,
I can go ahead and cheat on a test here at Yale if it's not really going to hurt the class.
but there's a difference between describing what happens and prescribing. I would say that social contract theory does a good job of prescribing. Obviously, humans aren't perfect, and
Right.
that's something that you accept as well.
Yeah.
But at least the prescription, what principles would we rationally agree to, sort of from a state of nature? It just happens to be true that even though people will defect, we would rationally agree to not killing one another, not discriminating against one another. That's still true.
Why would we rationally agree to that? I mean, for example, there's a Shantung compound. There's this story about Eric Liddell, the Olympian, who was in the Shantung compound, and a Harvard grad was actually captured as well and went to the Shantung compound. And he was a rationalist, a secular humanist who said, based off of reason, we can all reason together to the point of saying, this is fair for you and this is fair for me.
Yeah.
He went there and became a Christian because he realized you can't reason to the point together to be morally good and rational. He got to that point because he saw that there were rooms with extra bunks in them, and the men who were in these rooms wouldn't allow others to come in and share because they said, no, you're getting in the way. Even though we have an extra bunk here, you're still in the way. And so this guy got to the point of saying, no, we reasoned to the point of selfishness.
Yeah.
Okay, well, why did he become a Christian? Because he realized, no, there's moral obligation here. Jesus Christ actually showed that sacrifice, that human rights, that fairness is a real moral value and an ought and a should to live by. And that's why you should share with somebody else. Not just, let's all get to this point of trying to reason together to the point of sharing my bunk when that's going to get in the way of I already have limited resources here.
Yeah. Well, we can get a sort of a litmus test of consensus and rationality just here. Like, if we were to agree amongst one another to not kill one another, can everyone raise their hand who would agree to that? If they think that's a fair thing to agree to not kill one another from a state of nature. Do we agree with that? Do you agree with that?
Uh-oh. I'm a little nervous about this crowd right now.
But it's irrational to not do that. Would you agree or would you not agree to not killing one another in a state of nature? I think it's rational to do so. If we didn't, then that threatens our own self-interest. That threatens our safety just as a rational precept. And the same thing would go for not stealing, not discriminating against one another.
Right.
And one thing that you brought up earlier was that
But again, it was just like a couple years ago, basically.
Oh, yeah,
we all we came together like this and said racism's good. Okay. Why is that wrong and we're right now?
So
just because we're a few years later, it's more recent. Is that why?
Well, so take, for example, a Rawlsian theory.
Okay.
That's one where you sort of put yourself behind a veil of ignorance.
Yeah.
You don't know what position you'll enter into society, and then what is it rational for me to agree to? Oh,
yeah.
Sorry. Is it rational for me to agree to enter into a society where I don't know what race I'll be born as?
Right.
And where I would tolerate discrimination based on race?
Sorry, I don't think people can hear you. It's going to be a little louder.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, speak this way again.
Okay, I'll speak this way.
Rawlsian, yep.
Yeah, so Rawlsian.
Veil of ignorance.
Veil of ignorance. Is it rational for me to agree to enter a society where I might be racially discriminated against? The answer is that that's irrational. And prescriptively, that leads us to a conclusion that it's wrong to discriminate based on race. So, like, this is a secular way to arrive at a pretty robust account of morality. So, like, I feel like the reasoning tracks there.
Yeah.
Where do we need God?
I still struggle though with, are you really going to make a change in society just because of the veil of ignorance? Are you really going to fight for human rights tooth and nail to the point of being able to sacrifice your own life for somebody who doesn't look or act like you at all, or who is a totally different race based off of that code of ethics? But I don't think you will. I think at the end of the day, you're going to be a selfish animal and say, yes, we reason to the point, perhaps for just right now, of a certain type of goodness. But no, when the rubber really hits the road, you're going to appeal to your selfish desires. And I believe all those theories that you brought up can be good theories, but at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, you're going to appeal to selfish interest in all those theories versus the Christian ethic, which is tied to moral obligation, which is not Christian. That's just a moral transcendent source. But Jesus Christ brought it home in the sense of you're going to sacrifice even for your enemy.
But Christians have done a lot of bad things.
Yes.
Again, we're conflating the descriptive and the prescriptive.
I don't think we are.
No, I think we are.
How are we?
Okay, I'll explain. So Christianity prescribes these things, and Christians have done evil things. If we accept that it's inevitable...
So what do you call those people? What do you call those people?
Evil.
What do you call evil Christians? It begins with an H.
Hypocrite.
Hypocrites.
And what do you call evil social contract theorists? Hypocrites.
How? Because if my social construct is completely relative and it's based off of just a select group of people that we've decided for a certain time, that this is wrong and this is right, who's ultimately to say that that's truly right and wrong for all time?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the descriptive versus prescriptive that you were talking about, you were saying that the social contract theorist might be like sort
Yeah.
of hypocritical because people will inevitably do evil things and they will appeal to their own self-interest.
Right.
That happens with Christianity as well.
Yes,
Like,
but my whole point though is you're missing it, and maybe I'm not communicating it well.
Okay.
It's not about the hypocritical living that I'm talking about. So here's a knife.
Yeah.
It's a butter knife.
Okay.
I could use it to use butter and butter my bread like I did this morning, or I could use it to stick it in you. All right.
Okay.
So there would be a level of misuse
Yeah.
based off of what is that knife's real intent. It's not to stick it in you, it's to butter the bread.
Okay.
So Christianity, when it comes to what is Christ teaching, sacrifice for others, love your neighbor, treat the poor righteously according to what he defined as righteous, love your enemy, sacrifice for your enemy. Every single person is worthy of preservation and protection. Doesn't matter who you are at any point in time, universally. Okay, so if somebody says, well, let's go lead a crusade and just kill somebody because they don't act like us or live like us and just hang this cross on top of our flag. Okay, I'm not talking about the abuse in the sense of somehow that uproots the reality and truth of what Jesus talks about. No, I'm saying these are hypocrites. So what is the moral source underneath it all?
The moral source is rationality. And I'll
again-
explain. Wait, can I?
Yeah,
build
please
this out a little
do.
more?
Yeah.
Because you listed a few moral principles. You
Yeah.
listed generosity. You listed compassion.
Yeah.
These are things that we can absolutely rationally arrive at through social contract theory, a Rawlsian social contract theory. So when you say someone goes out and they host a crusade, I would say that contradicts the moral principles we would arrive to under a social contract. So I feel like that's just as hypocritical as it would be for a Christian to reject their own values and do the same. That's what I'm positing to you.
And I would say at the end of the day, it's not. If you can get away with it, because a social construct is flimsy at best. It's tremendously flimsy because there's no moral obligations and duties within a social construct theory. You need a transcendent source that's outside of your definition of truth, the culture's definition of truth, and the powerful's definition of truth. You need what Martin Luther King Jr. talked about, a law above the law in order to judge every person, every powerful person, every culture. Otherwise, it's, for the time being, we're going to say this is right or wrong. And so a level of hypocrisy, sure, I can get on board with a level in the sense of, hey, you and I just agreed. We shouldn't go slap that woman over there.
Yes.
But you just went and did it. So
No, I didn't.
that's hypocritical. That's hypocritical to what we just talked about in terms of a moral theory.
Yes.
Sure, yes, I can get on board with that.
Yeah.
But I certainly hope you don't usher in the word should, or you ought not to, or you need not to. Instead, you should be using the words, hey, we agreed to this. But as soon as you usher in moral obligations, moral duties, now you're appealing to a law outside the law. Martin Luther King Jr. talks about a law above the law, and that's hypocritical as a moral theory.
Okay, I'd love to respond to that. So,
Please.
When you say that when we are talking about morality, we're referring to some higher law. For me, I just think like in terms of describing morality, that morality it's sort of like insular. We produce morality, and like that. I mean, that's basically it. Like as in terms of social agreements, we generate morality just as a definitional thing. Like I'm operating under the assumption that like morality is something we produce.
All right, but where does it come from?
It comes from us. That's it.
You just randomly generate morality. That's it. Pull it out of the air.
That's a pretty deflationary way to express it. But
Well,
I mean,
how do you? I don't understand. We just generate morality. What does that mean? We just generate it.
well, we've done it for all.
I mean,
of
how?
okay,
Yeah.
This is a big point because we've done it for all of human civilization, and like people get it more right than others. This is
According to who? Says who?
according to rationality, because
But rationality is different for all times.
Okay, no,
and different for all people groups.
if people are killing innocent people, like okay, let me start on like this. So civilization after civilization.
Try and be a little louder.
Okay.
I don't think they can hear you.
Yeah. So for a lot of human time,
Yeah.
we've seen some convergence on basic moral principles. We've seen a lot of societies agree to not kill one another. A lot of societies agree to not steal from one another. These things have happened for all of human history, independent of Christianity. And the reason
All of human history?
Yeah.
The Roman Empire?
Well, they're very, very violent, but people have gotten it wrong.
That was the most
in terms of
dominant empire.
Okay, in terms of basic socialism, like it happens to be true that people have gotten these answers without appeal to Christianity. And
Sure.
I'd say that, yeah, and like
I agree with that.
Where would you say that comes from?
A moral source, a law above the law, which is not inherently Christian per se. It's any monotheistic or even, it could be polytheistic. As long as it is a law above the law, it's a transcendent source. Okay? So Hindus,
Sure.
Judaism,
Sure.
Islam, and the Judeo-Christian faith all posit the moral argument. I was reading about it for Hindus this morning, actually. They can all posit it. You, as an agnostic or an atheist or anything of the sort, cannot posit moral objectivity, duties, and obligations.
But the Christian worldview commits you to saying that they're wrong. They've gotten.
But that's a different question, though.
No.
No, they're
it's
right.
relevant.
They're right there.
No, it's relevant.
Okay.
Let me build this out. It's relevant because they're under the Christian worldview. Their worldview is wrong. It's incorrect. It's mistaken, and therefore, what principles they've produced, they're human constructed. Like if they've gotten higher, like if they've gotten the whole higher power situation incorrect, then like they're operating based on human intuition. They feel as though certain things are wrong, and as a result, they produce morality under their framework. But it happens as a result of shared intuitions within those societies.
The shared intuitions of most societies before all the abolitionist movements, which were, by the way, all done by Christians, before those abolitionist movements, it was a common consensus across the entire known world, have slaves. And that's a good thing. And that was reasonable and rational. So have slaves.
Uh-huh.
I'm not going to tell you you're wrong in that just because it's a few hundred years later. It's totally, we ration to the point of saying, at this point in time, if my civilization dominates yours during times of war, then I can take your spoils, my spoils of war, your spoils of war, really, bring them in and say, you're going to work for me, or you're going to be my sex slaves. And we reasoned. That was reasonable. That was rational. That was even just.
But okay, so we understand just today.
Yeah.
We understand that that's wrong.
Why is that wrong?
Okay, we can get there through secular means. So Rawlsian social contract, you don't know where you'll end up, you don't know where you'll be born, and it's rational for you to agree to a world where societies don't violently dominate one another, and that's just rational.
But where did that come from?
It came from us.
What do you mean it just came from us?
Under my worldview, that's basically.
But it had to come from somewhere. Did it come from the Greeks? Did it come from the Romans? Did it come from the Aztecs? Did it come from the Christians? Did it come from the Hindus? Where did that come from?
It came from the collective moral endeavor, from a moral tradition, ethics. We have huge thinkers. So like another point. To commit to the Christian worldview is to say that like these moral thinkers who've done secular morality,
right?
Like they're completely mistaken. Like they Rawls, like you have
they all
Mill, like all these people, like that this entire.
And can I tell you the truth?
Sure.
The majority of them didn't like the moral restraints of Christianity. They called it a prudish religion. And so they didn't like the moral teachings or the moral arguments that came out of the Christian faith. And so they just came up with these other ones. And many of them are honest about that. Transparent. There was a student out here the other day. I actually just saw him. I don't know where he went. But he debated me on Christianity for a half hour. Then he debated Cliffe on Christianity for another half hour. And probably my brother Rob, I don't know if he debated him too, on all about the intellectual evidence. And he was jumping around, question after question after question. But then all of a sudden I looked him face to face and I said, well, what's the real reason? And he said, sex ethics. That's the real reason why I'm not a Christian. And I loved that vulnerability, that honesty, that transparency. And I love that we caught it on tape too, because it went viral. So
I would know.
And I love how many professors, I'm sure here at this school too, but I'm thinking of Oxford right now, who said the same kind of thing. They said, we do not look into the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus Christ because we don't want Christianity to be true for it to impinge on what we do sexually.
I think that's just...
It's a moral issue. So this is tremendously germane to what we're talking about right now.
I would bracket that, at least right now. One thing I want to respond to is that, like, if what we're saying is that, like, at certain points in time, people have sort of wanted to reject Christianity Christianity, or sorry, more precisely, Christians have done some really messed up things.
Yes.
Some like colonial conquest, like a lot of.
And what do we call them again?
What's up?
What do we call them again?
Hypocrites. And what do we
Okay.
call Rawlsians? That
I don't know.
hypocrites.
I'm still not there.
Hypocrites.
Okay, at a time, just for a time, and it shifts after every few decades. The moral ethics to Christianity has always been true, right?
Well,
So for Rawlsians, no, that has shifted, that has changed. So to say that they're a hypocrite 30 years later is very inconsistent with 30 years previous. If the group of people reasoned to the point of morality being different 30 years later than it was to now.
okay, so if I give you a few moral principles that
Yeah.
a Rawlsian social contract would
Right.
produce.
Right.
So don't kill one another.
Yeah.
Be generous. Be kind to the poor, for example. Let's just take these three.
Yeah.
You agree with these three moral principles. Rawls would say that like we can do certain thought experiments to arrive at these.
Yeah.
And there's morality. So if you break these moral principles, then you've done something wrong. And that's what morality is.
Right.
I don't see where you're saying that would dissolve, because if we accept that this is the true moral framework, then no, that's the ought, that's the prescription.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it at the very least it's fair to say that like maybe it isn't, if like eventually over time people don't sort of subscribe to that. That's a descriptive thing.
Yeah. Okay, well, I would say then next point, since we've kind of beat this
Sure.
puppy to death. Next point would be fine. Okay, Rawlsian. Is that an atheistic perspective? Is it usually tied to atheism, or what worldview? Secular.
Yes.
Okay, so it's an immaterial type of thought experiment to get to the point of here's the moral oughts and shoulds and duties, which, by the way, you still can't use that for Rawlsian. You can't say moral obligations and duties.
Well, under my conception,
It's still
of morality,
it's still subjective to an audience, a crowd.
under my
It's not
conception of
objective.
morality. It is.
Okay, fine. That's still immaterial, and you're living in a material world
Yes.
as an atheist.
Yes.
So these are immaterial things that you're talking about, even when you kept talking about reason, consciousness, all these are immaterial things. So how do you pull them from the material? Or connected to the moral, oftentimes is mathematics, the question of mathematics. Einstein talked about it, then an amazing Pulitzer Prize winner talked about it in 1960. Many have talked about, from different worldviews, this one was an atheist, Einstein was a pantheist, talked about how it's amazing the mental, material states we have.
Yes.
So you mental, that's the reasoning.
Sure.
Your material, physical.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, the third category is mathematical. And Einstein and this other guy from 1960, the title of the paper was The Unreasonable Applicability of Mathematics. And what this paper is basically saying is, he uses the word miracle, he's an atheist. He's saying it's a miracle that we can do mathematics because mathematical numbers are correct. 2 + 2 = 4, no matter what. And it's like they're just hanging there and we just discovered it. We didn't create them, we just discovered it.
Sure.
So kind of like morality, we just discovered it, we didn't create it. These are immaterial things. So wouldn't it make way more sense for an immaterial God to exist and an immaterial spiritual realm to exist connected to these things rather than, well, Rawlsian, just physical, just material, and somehow we get the mental from the physical, and then somehow we get these mathematical rules that are always present, always existed, always the same, no matter what throughout time. How do you draw that from the material or from this worldview of agnosticism?
Well, so I have to let an important question just to make sure I understand what you were bringing up.
Yeah.
The claim is that me as a secularist, I can't appeal to morality because morality isn't it's not in the physical domain, and I'm more or less a materialist. Like that's the claim.
No, I would say Richard Dawkins would say free will and morality are many more. It's not just Richard Dawkins. Many atheist moral theorists would say these are simply misfirings from an evolutionary process, and we're lucky that they've misfired in the way they have.
Okay.
So free will, consciousness, morality, all these immaterial things. They don't really exist, they just seem to exist.
Okay. So your claim then will be that morality objective. It's almost like math. Like math is like it's immaterial, but it's you can point to it. You can say this
It has edges.
It has edges.
It has edges.
So that means there's an objective answer to the trolley problem. You should have a real answer to the trolley problem if morality is objective. What's your answer? It should be true. You should be able to get it from the Bible, correct?
No, not from the Bible.
No.
No.
Okay. From where then?
You tell me according to your worldview.
Rationality. But you would also have to commit yourself to that because it's not coming from the Bible, but
Right.
there's also an objective answer to it.
And
So
I would
how then
say,
do you
you
justify
keep
the
saying the word objective. How, based off of rationality from social construct, do you get this word
I'm not
objective?
saying objective. I would commit myself to saying there is not an objective answer to the
Yeah.
trolley problem, but you would. So where does the answer come from?
It still comes from the value of human beings. How do you look at the value of human beings? Why would one life be valuable? Why would many lives be valuable? And yet again, my friend, the whole reason why you believe that human life is valuable, whether you're going to admit it or not, it's because we come from the seedbed of the Christian worldview, which is all are created in God's image,
I would disagree.
which comes from Judeo-Christian values. All right. I'm glad you disagree. Give me a history lesson right now then and tell me, where did we get the perspective that you have value, that I have value, that this guy with the crazy glasses over here has value? Why do we all have value no matter what? No matter what level of consciousness you have, no matter what level of DNA makeup you have, why do you have objective value? Don't just tell me your reasoning, but tell me historically how we got to this point.
I don't.
You know. Okay, you don't know. But you just told me you did know, though.
What's up? Wait,
You
sorry.
just a second ago, you told me you were going to give me an answer. You said you did know.
Well, not on the historical account, but like my question was like more to the my question was more relevant to like how do we describe morality? That's what the question was. So like I mean
But
well, I-
don't you understand? If we are having this discussion on morality, and we're going through all these different theories, well then the discussion better be attached to value. Why do you have value to begin with? Why are we even having the discussion of what is right and wrong and oughts and shoulds, an ethical system? It's because we're saying every human being has value no matter what. Okay, well, we better start there then. Why do human beings have value? Why do we ascribe them value?
well so it,
And
okay.
historically, you just disagreed with me, and then you said, I don't know. That's why I'm nervous right now about this discussion. Very nervous. Because you said it did not come from the Judeo-Christian value system. You said, no, Stuart. Then I asked you, I said, okay, please give me the history lesson, because I'm actually really curious about this. I think it'd be fantastic if you had an alternate
Well, actually,
answer.
Can I amend
But you said, I don't know. So how do you know I'm not right if you said clearly, I don't know?
Well, allow me to clarify
Yeah.
my stance. So like let me grant that
Yeah.
like the Judeo-Christian values have influenced the West, etc.
Okay,
Descriptively, I think that's true.
thank you.
Yeah, okay.
But why is it true? Why though?
I mean, it's just historically,
But why?
it's the Christian tradition that was brought westward and
Okay.
throughout the world.
Okay, but what's at the heart of that? The Christian tradition. Okay. What did he do that was different? Why did that rule out every other moral theory of the time?
It had pretty good morality.
He had according to who though?
God.
God. So what is more reasonable? Ever since the beginning of time, what you just talked about, you beautifully historically fleshed it out. It came from the source of God, played out through Jesus Christ, not the Bible, but through God, played out through Christ. And then yes, moral ethics came from it. That's why at Harvard, Robert Coles, one of the top ethicists, said that all ethical statements are simply footnotes to the Sermon on the Mount. Simply footnotes.
So okay.
So I think you just,
But no, okay.
you
so,
put it better than I did.
Okay, descriptively, that might be true.
Yeah.
But is it also true that descriptively we can still arrive at very robust morality?
Yes.
Through secular means.
Not if you can't give me a reasonable understanding for why you are valuable no matter what, and why am I valuable no matter what, and why somebody who has special needs is valuable no matter what. If you can't convince me why they truly have objective value, then I don't know how we can get to that point.
Okay, so let's start from like when we're born, we're raised into the world. What do we know? We know that we experience a variety of incredible stuff. We experience relationships. We experience beauty.
Okay.
We experience art. Like,
Yeah.
from a sample, everybody experiences these things.
Yeah.
And that's happened for like all of human history.
Right.
So then the inevitable question is like, okay, well, how do we regulate our interactions with them?
Right.
And I think the most plausible explanation is there are certain things that it's rational to agree to. And like I feel like what I'm sort of doing here, it's sort of like reconstructing like a social contract, and I think it's very convincing actually. So I feel like if we accept that, like I would argue that like this is a way we can arrive at morality. You would argue that like we've arrived at it through God and through the Judeo-Christian tradition. How do we like square these with one another? I think one is more plausible than the other. Because I for God and others, the reason I don't believe in God is because doing so would commit me to a variety of philosophical positions that I think would be unlikely. So, beginning of the universe, where did the universe come from?
Okay, but I'm still waiting though for a more robust understanding for why you are valuable right now, why I'm valuable, and why you shouldn't smack me in the face if I say something offensive about your mother.
It's because the truth is that I value other people, and like that's true.
But why?
I was raised to value other people.
Because you were raised. Okay, I was not raised to value other people.
Okay.
I was raised to step on other people. I was raised in New York City, so it's a dog eat dog. And so in downtown Manhattan, I better beat out the other guy by any means necessary in order to get the position I want. So that's how I was raised, so don't tell me I'm wrong.
Well,
so I devalue human beings.
Imagine for a second that we had a society that was constructed with that as a moral principle. What would happen? It would cease to exist.
The Roman Empire did not cease to exist, my friend. The Roman Empire lasted for a really long time, and that's what I was describing. Downtown Manhattan right now, the dog eat dog, that's very Roman Empire. Sodom and Gomorrah as well, a mix.
For example, the Roman Empire, it's not here today.
But it lasted. How long did it last?
It lasted very long.
It dominated the entire world.
But imagine, like, within the Roman Empire.
There can be great evil within Hitler. Okay, let's go to Hitler. I mean, let's keep going.
Sure.
There wasn't breakdown. There was incredible world domination. Yes. And there was evil within it. Dog eat dog.
Right. And over.
So I wouldn't usher in this type of goodness and say you have to have goodness in order for society to last. First of all, according to who? What's goodness?
Over time, they die out.
Over time, they die out.
Yes.
Over time, they die out. That's why it's wrong.
Well, okay,
because they die out over time.
Think about it.
They don't die out over time.
No. Think about it on like more macro. Like, let's start like within just a small community. A small community where people find it acceptable to kill one another, and then they do. What happens? It doesn't last. And like I understand what.
No, they dominate others though. I'm talking about those that dominate others. Yeah, you're right. If it was a small community and you and I killed each other, we wouldn't last. I'm talking about the dominant societies though, that looked at other tribes and said, "Let's go get them, and kill them off."
At the very least, like,
they were very successful.
Okay, but at the very least, can we start with this sort of like smaller community?
Why?
Okay? Well, what you argue was that like it would die. That's free. It's irrational.
Why is it irrational?
Because it would die off.
Okay, because it'll die off of a small little group.
Well, also like
that makes it irrational.
The more fundamental reason is that like it's not in our interest to enter into an agreement where people are okay with killing one. It's not rational. And like I'd love to keep deferring to sort of like the walls of social contract here, in that like societal domination, we can still say that's wrong. That's the reference point here.
I'm just still having such a tough time because for thousands of years, historically, people would have completely disagreed with that thought. It's rational not to enter into war. Do you know how many societies would say it is very rational to enter into war so I can get your land? So I can get your women, so I can plunder you? No, it's very rational. So you're saying, what, it's just based off of time maybe? So I want to give you an argument maybe. Just over time, people got to the point of reasoning together, oh shoot, we shouldn't have war. Let's just have peace. And so is that why we have worldwide peace right now? No, let me answer that for you. We don't have worldwide peace. So time doesn't make a difference. The sinful human heart always has evil and goodness within it. And that poisons the lot.
Well, I don't think that necessarily has to be placed under a religious context. We could just say that like humans are interested in themselves, and that's something that just happens to be true, and that's something that's caused societies to be so aggressive to one another.
And I call that the sin problem.
Yeah. Can I ask you like just on a slightly different topic?
Yes.
So you mentioned like God shaped.
Yeah.
I think my original question here, like in the past, was like, if society sort of produced localized moralities without appeal to God, then like how can that happen with them not appealing to God, without appealing to the Christian God? And your response was everyone sort of has a God-shaped hole that they feel as though like certain moral principles like should be true. Could you flesh out that idea? I just want to make sure I understand.
Oh, absolutely. Dostoevsky said it. Nietzsche said it himself as well. Dostoevsky said, if there is no God, do what you want. He was not saying, if you don't believe in God, do what you want and you're just a morally horrible person.
Yeah.
People think he said that. He didn't say that. He was saying, logically, if you don't believe in a God, then there's no moral obligation, shoulds and oughts, and so do what you want. But he said many atheists are good people, and that's true for me in my life as well. So just because you have societies that are atheistic and are good in a way, where, again, I don't know where they get this obligation of good, but you can be good without God, clearly. And so a God-shaped hole more so is for me, psychology. Because I believe, my friend, if you live for any type of academia, your grades, if you live for what you're going to do next after you graduate, if you live for a girl in your life, if you live for any of these things, ultimately they're going to eat you alive. It does not fit in your God-shaped hole. What does fit in your God-shaped hole is someone called God, a transcendent, eternal source that'll never let you down. And psychologically, this is an agreement across the board. You have to have something eternal. It cannot be finite. This is why David Foster Wallace said everybody worships something. It's way smarter, and he was an atheist who hung himself, partly because of his God-shaped hole. It's way smarter to worship something infinite that will never let you down and will always be there than something that is finite that will always let you down eventually. Your parents are going to die if you're living for them. Your kid is going to get sick, maybe die, or maybe take off.
Yeah.
Eventually, you're going to lose your kid. Eventually, you're going to lose all these things.
Yeah.
So none of these things will fill your God-shaped hole other than God.
Sure. So I guess one of my questions there is that is that an appeal to truth, or is it an appeal to convenience? And like I'd like to sort of
I think you define truth as that which comports most with reality.
Yeah.
And reality is you're living for something, and I would call that something a type of vacuum that wants to suck in, it's a God-shaped hole, suck in anything to live for. What are you going to live for ultimately is going to help, is ultimately going to help sustain you in life, or it's going to harm you. It's going to lead to something like addiction.